Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Parent Pod. Tonight, we're going to be joined again by Jacob Stapledon from Children's Cove. We're going to be discussing body safety tonight, how to talk to your kids about it, how to open that conversation, and some guidelines to kind of discuss that with your kids. Jacob's been our guest before, and we will be having him regularly to have some educational conversations about not only body safety, internet safety, everything you need to know about your kids, what's grooming, all those things. So he's a great guest to have. Also, additionally tonight, if you submit a question, or if you did submit a question in advance, or you submit one during our show, we're going to be giving away a $25 gift card to the 1856 Country Store, which is in Centerville. They're a great little country store. They're not your grandma's country store, and they're not just about penny candy. We're going to talk a little bit about more of that in a minute. For those of you who are new, we are joined every week by different guests and parents and educators across the community, and so we're connecting you to the resources you have, information you need. Sometimes we're having a laugh, sometimes we're covering something serious. So kick back, this hour's for you, and thanks for joining us. So right now I'm going to bring on Jacob, and we are going to discuss body safety, and we're going to have him introduce himself now. Hi, Jacob. Welcome. Nice to see you again.
Oh, good to be back.
Good to be back. I love it. And we got the video camera working today. So
we have working this time. Yeah.
That's a plus.
Perfect.
So just for people who may not know you, why don't you just introduce yourself really quick?
Absolutely. So my name is Jacob Stapledon. I am the Community Education and Outreach Coordinator at Children's Cove. We are the Child Advocacy Center for the Cape and the Islands. So we work collaboratively with investigative agencies such as law enforcement, the District Attorney's Office, and DCF for cases involving crimes against children. So child sexual abuse, severe physical abuse, witness to domestic violence, and commercial exploitation of children. So whether that be online or human trafficking, we provide coordinated response for all of those types of cases on Cape Cod.
Excellent. And let me just pop up Children's Cove's website over here for those who may not have it, so you have this as a resource. It's childrenscove.org, but I'm going to throw it up on the screen for you right now, just so everybody has it while we're talking, and I'm going to pop up our names. So we're talking about body safety tonight, right, Jacob?
Absolutely. Yes, we are.
And I know last time we talked about internet safety, and that was really informative, and you know, a lot of our schools are talking about it, but body safety is equally important, and from an early age. So let's talk a little bit about that. What is body safety?
So I think the first thing that we need to recognize is, you know, really defining what body safety means. And the first thing I like to let everybody know is it's lingo, right? When we talk about body safety, that's language that's used by people in our profession that work with children, that work with children in childcare centers. It's not necessarily language that everyday parents would use, right? But what body safety is it's just safety, but it's focusing around the parts of the body that you know, that child should have control over. So whether that's the private parts of the body, or if it's just really their entire body altogether, it's recognizing and having conversations about the body, right? So when we're talking about body safety, we're really emphasizing parents having conversations with their children about their bodies and not making it a taboo subject, right? That the conversation around the body parts, who is allowed to see children's bodies, who is allowed to touch children's bodies, what type of touch is appropriate, what type of touch is not appropriate, that is a regular ongoing conversation. I think a lot of the times, you know, as parents, we get stuck in thinking about, you know, by talking about the private parts of the body, we're going all the way to the birds and the bees talk, and we're not. Body safety is really about regular, ongoing communication with children about their bodies. And so, you know, I think it's really easy for us to overcomplicate things when really we need to bring it back and remember that we are talking to children. So
absolutely. And can you give us, from a simple standpoint, so this is something I kind of learned early on, was to refer to body parts as their normal parts. You don't give it a nickname or a cutesy name or anything like that, that it is actually better to refer to it by its actual name, whether it's the penis, the vagina, uterus, those types of things. And I remember early on with the first and even with the second, people were like, don't you think they're a little young? And I'm like, it's better and safer for them in the long run, because they then know the proper term for it, that it belongs to them, that it's theirs. And I've always been supported by the doctor within our pediatrician appointments, because they're always like, now remember, it's just the doctor, or if you have an issue, you can go to mom or dad. And so that's one thing that people can do right from the beginning.
Absolutely. You know, I think one of the pieces that we have to remind ourselves as parents is we have so much information tapped into our brains with a lot of context that children don't have, young children don't have. And so one of the things that much to our enjoyment, but also much to those cringeworthy moments, is that kids are very curious. They're information seeking. They want to learn about the world. Sometimes they ask questions at the absolute worst time, but it's because they want to know things. And so the best way that we can teach them is by giving them the straightforward, honest answers about things. I think that we can probably remember, if we go back into our childhoods, how much our parents may have been averse to talking about sex, talking about the body, calling it a penis, calling it a vagina, calling it a vulva, that you didn't know a lot about these terms until maybe you were looking at it in a textbook or somebody else was telling you about it. When we are doing that, and when we're not calling parts by their name, or we're shying away from conversations, what we're doing is we're teaching our kids that certain subjects are taboo, that we don't talk about certain things. And when we're doing that, we're creating a barrier to clear communication with our children. And so by being able to answer those questions that they have, or just give them information, it creates this open dialogue, right? And so, you know, when we're talking about these things, it doesn't need to be a sit down and we're going to talk about the private parts of your body. You know, this part here is called a penis. No, it's going to be in those moments that are normal, that happen every single day. What every parent does, you know, 4 to 7 times a day, depending on how old their kids are. When we're talking about young kids, you know, like under 4 or so, is we're going to be cleaning those parts of their body. We're going to help them use the bathroom. We're going to help them take a bath. And we can call those body parts their names at that time, you know? And so it's very much, I think when we're talking about body safety, we're talking about body parts, is by being able to name those. It's not biology class, right? We're not breaking down the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell. We're talking about like, okay, and so now I'm going to clean your vagina, because it's really important to make sure that your vagina is clean, and you don't want to have any poopies in there. You don't want to have any soap in there, because you could get sick, you know, and having that language be appropriate for that child, so that it starts to make a connection for them, you know. And then also saying, hey, did you know that your vagina is a private place, and, you know, only mommy or daddy or mommy and whoever, or whoever the caregivers are, can touch those when we're helping you get dressed or clean, right? You can say those kinds of things without making it weird. It's just a statement of fact, and you don't need to bring in all this other scary stuff in the world into that conversation.
And you're right, it's a statement of fact, and the kids accept it as a statement of fact. Absolutely. They don't even, okay. And it's funny, because as they get older, they know that. And sometimes the kid might be a little more reactive. Oh, he grazed me in the penis. Okay, well, sometimes that could happen when you're playing football. That might happen.
Absolutely.
And so, but you're right, it starts the conversation from an early age. And you refer to that barrier, because you're right, by not talking about things or making them taboo, it creates a communication barrier. And we touched upon this last time, because then as they grow up, who's going to be educating them? Who do you want to be having those honest conversations with them? Do you want the internet having that conversation, their friends, another adult that you don't know? Or do you want it to be you, and you want them to be able to come to you with those conversations?
Absolutely. And that's really when we kind of use this broad term of body safety. We're talking about safety, and we're talking about those things that had always previously been taboo subjects, and trying to break that stigma of that taboo. Because, now that we are in that digital information age, if you want to take a look at what the risk is of not having these conversations and not allowing that clear communication, type in a question that an 11-year-old may have about sex or about body parts into a Google image search, and then see what comes up. And that's the kind of stuff that secondarily kids will be able to access. And so, just like you said, is do you want your kids to come to you and have these conversations, or do you want them to find God knows what else is out there?
On the internet. And again, you bring up a good point, because they are becoming more internet savvy, especially in the digital age of remote learning. They are getting savvier. They're going to get computer skills even earlier. There's apps, there's the sky's the limit. So, you got to have practice, good browser safety and everything like that, but you don't know what they might look up as an 11-year-old. Hey, what's this? And who knows what's going to come up, and what video or what they're going to click on that's then going to be your child's first ever experience with that.
Exactly. And that's the piece that, it's almost funny, is when we avoid it, the fear that we have is what becomes the reality of what they may find if they go into that image search. So we're talking about creating a layer of communication and those levels of communication about things that could eventually become taboo or more challenging. But we want to be able to create that safety to say, hey, I have this thing happening with my body, and it's kind of weird, and being able to have that conversation about, pubic hair or about something else down the road. That's important.
Absolutely. And so as they get older and we graduate from talking about body parts, can you give us a couple other examples kind of with some of the age groups that we could kind of fit it into everyday conversation?
Yeah, I think it's the big piece is remembering that these don't need to be these long drawn out scary conversations, right? When kids are younger, really from 1 year old on, and you can even start younger, just to practice saying those things out loud, because they're not going to remember anyways. But it's good for you to practice and get used to saying it to that child of yours. But as they're getting older, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's going to be that kind of constant reinforcement, right? Is, hey, when you're bringing them swimming, hey, the parts that are under your bathing suit are private, and nobody should be touching those or asking to touch those or looking at them or ask to look at them, unless it's, us trying to help you get dressed. And nobody should be asking you about that. You could say that not every time, because that's going to be very repetitive, but every other time or every couple of times, those kinds of things.
That's a good one, because we had swimming lessons last year before COVID. And it was Ethan's first experience in the boys' locker room. Not, I'm not in there. So I was a little nervous actually about that, not being able to go in, check on, or supervise. I didn't know how this was going to go. And he came out and he got in the car and he goes, I got to talk to you about something. And I'm like, what? He goes, do you know that they just change out in the open? And I could see everything. And I go, well, that can happen sometimes in the boys' locker room. He goes, I was uncomfortable with that. I went into my own changing stall and pulled the curtain, and I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not going to do that. I go, absolutely. You do what's comfortable for you. And I think that's great that you went into the stall. And I love that, because we've had these honest conversations. At almost 10 years old, he could say, hey, I wasn't comfortable with that. I chose instead to do this. And then he felt comfortable enough to talk to me about it after the fact.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that's so important is sometimes, things get bogged down by gender identity and parental role and all of that kind of stuff. And so, it's a really fantastic example to say that, oh, hey, I didn't feel comfortable with this situation, and with seeing all this other stuff. And I went and did this in private, and being able to reinforce that to say, hey, you know what, that's really great that you didn't feel comfortable and you did something and then you talked to me about it. It's a reinforcing moment, and I think that it's so important for us to be able to listen to kids when they're saying they didn't feel comfortable about something, and being able to say, hey, that's really good that you were able to tell me about that, or please tell me more about that. I think one of the things that we always talk about as an example is giving so-and-so, grandpa so-and-so or uncle so-and-so a hug, right, at the holidays, and maybe that kid doesn't want to do it. That's okay, because we want to be able to reinforce their autonomy with their bodies about not wanting to give that hug, not wanting to give that kiss, and those kinds of things that are very important. And so those are the examples that we can give, and you can have as conversation starters with kids as they are getting older, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, because that's the place where they're starting to identify their independence around those kinds of things. So you can have conversations with them and say, hey, has there ever been a time where you felt uncomfortable about a situation that you were in and you didn't know what to do? That's a very simple question you can have in the car, you can have at dinner or after dinner, or a time where maybe you're noticing they're feeling uncomfortable about something, to open that dialogue. And that's going to again allow that practice of, hey, I felt uncomfortable in this situation. Well, how did you handle it? And being able to talk about some of those options.
I like that you brought up the hug thing as an example, because it wasn't when we grew up. That wasn't ever offered as a choice. I didn't really think anything twice about it until I started learning more as I became a parent. And I've noticed that even when my kids go to say goodbye, my grandmother says, "Oh, if you don't want a hug, that's okay." And she's so nonchalant, and it's so great to see even she does it, and she did it without me even having a discussion with it. But I do see that more and more, and people going, "That's okay,"
Yeah,
it's fun, and I think that's great, because even with my younger one, she's very hesitant when she first sees people or comes into a situation, and she doesn't always want a hug, or she's kind of shy, and people respect her boundary, and that's been great, because we've told her, it's okay, you don't have to have a hug. When you're ready to talk to all of us, that's okay. And so she's learned that she has control. It's her body, and she has control over if she wants to give a hug.
yeah, absolutely.
So as easy as that. So we've kind of talked about a little bit how to start the conversations and when you start having them, and a couple examples and conversation starters. Do you have any other conversation starters or anything like that? That might
Yeah, I think one of the other ones, which is really good, and this can seem out of the blue, and you can have this with kids when they're really young, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it may seem kind of strange to be asking this, but you can create a context around it to, again, just let it be open to communication. So you can start something. Again, these conversations don't need to be sit down. They can be if you're on a long drive in the car or something like that. You can say, hey, I want to ask you a question. Has anyone ever asked to look or touch any parts of your body? Right? And so as adults, as parents, we know where our minds went, right? Our minds just went to the private parts and everything like that, right? You know what I would love for an answer from a kid? Well, yeah, every time I go to get my hair cut.
Yeah.
Or yeah, whenever I go to the doctor. Or yeah, that lady who put a temporary tattoo on me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of those things that we can do is start differentiating positive, what's touches and accesses to our bodies with permission, and when are those times that aren't like that, right?
Absolutely.
Because we can say, yeah, and that person should have touched your body because they were cutting your hair, right? They should have been touching your head and this part, and then you can even bring that conversation further and say, now, if you were getting a haircut from somebody, what part of your body should they probably not touch, right? Even if they said, well, probably not my foot.
Yeah, I was just going to say the foot.
Touch your foot. You don't want them cutting off your toes, right? Because we're not overcomplicating this with a 4 or 5-year-old, right? They don't have the burden of knowledge that we have. You can be creating hey, you wouldn't put milk in a cup that's upside down. You'd want to make sure you're turning it, right? So you're creating a logic. You're creating a connection to where is it appropriate here? Where is it appropriate? Where is it not appropriate to be, right? And so that's creating a situation where if something weird happened, they may be more inclined to tell you about that situation that occurred. Another piece too is creating that dialogue around things that, again, it's not necessarily having to be the bad thing, but it ties into body safety. And so a good question could be, hey, tell me about something that made you upset lately. Was there anybody that made you upset? Oh yeah, my buddy Jake, he said something to me and he took my toy and it made me mad. And what did you do? Did you say anything to them? And having that conversation. And then you could also say, have there been any adults that have made you upset? Right? Because then you're just allowing that conversation to be normal. It doesn't have to be abnormal. I think sometimes when we're concerned about something as parents, we go fishing for information, right? And when you go fishing, what do you use? You use bait. And sometimes you get the answer you want, even if it's not the answer that it actually is, right? And so by creating a dialogue of regular, open, honest communication, that's something that's going to help along those lines. And when you're getting to those ages with children that are, 11, 12, 13, that's when and sometimes younger than that, depending on the age of your child and that level of communication, that's when you could start getting into those conversations about, are you attracted to anybody, or has anybody said that they have crushes on you, and talking about respect and talking about things like consent and opening up those conversations at an early age, right? Because you've already had that consent conversation when you're talking about hugs from Uncle Jake, right? And just continuing that as a conversation over time.
Absolutely. We have a question right now, Jacob. Elizabeth wants to know, so it's kind of multi-parts. They're posting it on a different form. So how do you handle refusal for permission to have a primary care physician offer care regarding the annual checkup with the need to remove clothing? So I think they're saying annual checkup, and they don't want I think this is what Liz is getting at. They don't want the child. If the child doesn't want to have to remove the clothing, how can you handle that?
So if a child doesn't want to remove their clothing and the primary care physician is not willing to provide a service to that child to do an exam without that. So I think that there's a couple of things that you can do there. So the first is having a conversation with that child and saying, hey, is there a particular reason why you don't want to get undressed in this situation, and explaining what it is with that doctor and why they are there to be seeing them. I think there's a lot of things that could go into that. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's something nefarious happening. It could just be that child has a particular level of privacy where they don't feel comfortable doing that. Maybe they don't like the doctor. Maybe their hands are really super cold, the last time that they did something and it didn't feel good.
Maybe they don't feel bad.
Yeah, maybe there's something new about their body that they're embarrassed about. There could be a situation where maybe they're just starting to get pubic hair and they don't want anybody to know that because they may think that there's something wrong with them, or maybe they're getting breast buds. Those kinds of things where that discomfort and unknowingness about their body makes it even more difficult to talk about, especially with a stranger. Because even if somebody has been to the same pediatrician their whole life, they see them once a year or when they're sick, So I think exploring that with them as a non-judgmental conversation, asking if there's a way that you can be supportive. Do you want me in the room? Is there, do you want a different gendered doctor? Maybe it's a male doctor and it's a female child, or vice versa, talking about those kinds of things. And then having a conversation with the pediatrician's office about it. At the end of the day, you are your child's greatest advocate. And if there's a real stubbornness and hard fastness, and this is the way that we have to do it, I mean, again, this is a personal opinion, is, there should be shared decision making in all medical decisions. And if the medical decision is about, how a child's care is being given, as the caregiver, as the individual who has that full responsibility, you should be able to negotiate with that doctor and say, hey, look, I understand that there's certain things that you'd want to do, but they don't feel comfortable doing it. So are there other ways that you can do it or not? And if they're very hard and fast about it, well, you have a decision that you can make.
Absolutely. I like the way you said that. We have another question here from Tracy Lamperti. She would like to know, she's interested in knowing your thoughts about nakedness in the home.
Nakedness in the home. Well, it depends on what do you mean? Because nakedness for young children is a very natural normative thing. A lot of kids don't like wearing clothing, especially under the age of 3. I mean, my children, they love clothes. They love wearing different clothes. They love, wearing dresses. They love wearing all of those kinds of things. But there's also times that before bath time or any of those kinds of things, they love running around the house naked. Now we don't let them run in front of the window naked. We have our own rules kind of around that. But we're not going to have them feel shame around their naked bodies. I think that there's different levels of appropriateness. There's different levels culturally related to that. But I think depending on the context of that, there could be some problematic pieces if you get down the road. So if that's happening as children are getting older, when they would normally develop privacy, and those privacy rules and talking about that kind of stuff have already happened, and it continues to be challenging. There is, exploring why, if you're seeing nakedness outside of the home, that they're, say, in the middle of second grade and they're in class and all of the clothes come off. All right, that might be a little bit outside. But then if you're talking about, whole family systems, everybody involved, and, it's Taco Tuesday night and everybody's at the table in the buff, then, again, depends culturally where things are, depends on ages. But there could potentially be some boundaries and issues and things there. So without a little bit more context, it's harder to tie in.
We have Leo Garcia joining us. What's the relationship between privacy and shame?
Trying to build a connection there. So I think I will go to an old definition that I heard a long time ago by a fantastic colleague, which ties back into guilt versus shame. And so when we talk about guilt is feeling sorry for something that has been done, whereas shame is feeling regret for who you are as a person. Okay. And so when we're talking about bodies and we're talking about the human body and anatomy, if we're talking about privacy, everybody should be allowed and allotted a certain degree of privacy based on their autonomy. Okay. So there was a period of time where one of my daughters, she did not want daddy to give her a kiss. No kisses, no hug. Breaks my heart, but I'm also going to respect that. There are times where my daughter wants me to be the one to give him a bath and they don't want mommy to do it. Or maybe they want mommy to do it and they don't want daddy to do it, right? So respecting those privacy and wishes around the parts of their body, that's body autonomy, that's saying privacy, that's saying, I don't want you to come in here. Shame is when you're, or when somebody is feeling as though there is something wrong with their body by how it's presented, by how it looks, by how somebody comments about it. And so when we're, maybe we're talking about when people are ridiculing how their bodies look based on their weight or by their shapes or by their colors or those kinds of things, when an individual feels negative about their own view, how they're seen to the world and how they see themselves, that's that shame. And when if we're shaming somebody for wanting to wear a particular pair of clothing, that's taking away from their autonomy.
Absolutely. When should people ask for help?
So I think that's a really big question because, and a good one, because sometimes, parents may feel like, man, something doesn't seem right here. My kid's behavior has completely changed. And, they want to talk that over with someone, but they don't know who, or they don't know when, or maybe they'll talk to a peer, or they'll talk to a friend, and they'll say, oh, that's just normal stuff, and my kid went through that, and it doesn't feel very validating. But I think the biggest piece is when a parent feels like something is absolutely wrong here. Listen to yourself. I think that there's a lot of resources available in our community depending on where you live. Children's Cove is absolutely one of them. For if you live anywhere on the Cape and Islands, we can point you in that direction. But I think one of the biggest pieces to pay attention to is if you're noticing significant behavior changes with your child, that are either quick in onset, or they take place over time, and you're saying, I don't even recognize who my kid is right now. I think that there are sometimes some exceptions to that when you're hitting those hard 13, 14, 15 year old ages, for both boys and girls. But when you're noticing that a child is, seeming more sad or withdrawn, they won't talk to you, they're spending more time alone, or sometimes even the opposite, they're terrified to leave your sight. They don't want to go to places that they previously had no problem with. They're starting to react in a fearful way with somebody getting close to them, right? I mean, everybody has kind of a personal space bubble. They develop that over time. Definitely not when they're young kids. There's no such thing. But as they're getting older, we all develop kind of a personal space bubble. But if somebody's reacting out of fear as opposed to discomfort, that's some stuff that's concerning. And, I think the big thing is, if they're looking to talk with you one-on-one about something and they seem to be having a really difficult time in doing that, that's the time to pay attention. And even just acknowledging is, it seems like you have something really important to talk about, or something's bothering you, and maybe you just don't know how to talk about it with me. Do you think that that's right? That gives them a very easy out, and we don't need to force that conversation any more than that at that point.
Absolutely. What should I do if my child tells me something strange or tells me something happened?
Yeah, so I think sometimes kids may say things, and again, depending on the age, they may say something which is just kind of wild, and you're not quite sure what it is that they're saying. But if you're seeing that disclosure in conjunction with some of this other concerning behavior, or if they do make a direct disclosure about something happening, step one is to stay calm. I think, one of the most difficult things as a parent is to stay calm in a moment when you're having a oh shit moment, right? A real genuine, this is scary, oh my God, what am I going to do kind of moment. Internally, we may turn into just a puddle, right?
Yeah.
But the most important thing is to be calm, because our children and children in general react to how the person in charge is reacting as well. So if we escalate and we get angry and then that child is either going to escalate or they're going to withdraw, because that's become a fearful reaction for them. They're saying, oh my God, I did that by saying something. Same thing as if we break down crying and, oh my God, how could I let this happen? I'm the worst parent ever. Then that reaction is also going to be for the child. I was just making it up. I didn't really mean it, right? That could be a potential outcome. So staying calm and saying, hey, thank you very much for telling me that. That must have been really difficult to talk about. Is there anything else that you want to tell me? Being able to listen, to acknowledge, to say thank you to that, and then getting help right away. And if you're not 100% sure where to get that help, you can contact Children's Cove. We're not an emergency center. We're not a 24-hour place. But if you call us after hours, I'll give you a call back the next day. We're in the office Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. Or if it's a direct disclosure, somebody did A, B, and C to me, you can contact law enforcement, and they'll be in touch with us as well.
And is there anything else we should not do? Because you've touched on a couple things in terms of going fishing with bait, things like that.
Yeah. No, that's the big thing. So not asking those direct questions. If a child's making a statement about something, is not diving into that too much, because sometimes we may ask those leading questions. Oh, so it was Uncle Jake and he did this to you, right? They may just take the easy way to say yes or no or something along those lines. Yeah, and then you're creating a challenge with what may happen next steps down the road. So not fishing for that information, really asking minimal but critical questions is the way to go, right? What happened? When did it happen? Where did it happen? Who was it with? And going with that. Don't try to be a detective. That's not your job. You're a parent, you're a caregiver, you're a guardian. That's your job. That's your role. Nobody can do that but you. So don't use like dolls or stuffed animals to say, where did they touch you, right? Because that could induce that magical thinking, because especially younger kids, they're going to think, oh, we're playing a game. And then it goes to that next place. And I think the other piece too, is make sure you believe them, right? I think one of the hardest things that we have, is, well, this couldn't possibly be because it's that person that I trust. We've talked about body safety. We've talked about these things. Don't fall into the trap that maybe you've misunderstood what they've said or they misrepresented. Always believe them, right? So don't go down that place, because guess what? It is better to believe them and be wrong than to not believe them and be wrong. And that's the kind of place that, it's so important to be able to listen and hear what it is that they have to say and take everything seriously. So don't minimize. I'm not saying shoot off flare guns and run them down to the emergency room, over something that you're not 100% sure about. Have a measured, safe, controlled response.
Great points. Now, it kind of made me think back on another question. What are some ways to have conversations with family members who may not respect if they don't want to give a hug, or, we are using the proper terminology here. What are some great ways to kind of facilitate that conversation with either our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, or peers who may not be as up to date on some of this education?
I think it's all about, for me at least, it's all about your relationships and making it relatable. I think one of the things that as parents you have to remember is that it's nobody else's expectation to educate your kids about body safety. And so it's also, you can't expect anybody else to be educating your parents or your siblings or your uncles or those folks about your rules or body safety or things to the level that they are. I think, when you're talking about older folks, one of the things that sometimes is a really good connection is, man, things aren't like they used to be. It's really not safe for kids nowadays. And so because of that, we're making sure we're teaching about safety. And then getting into those kinds of conversations. And here's some of the things that we're doing because we want to make sure that our kids are safe. Don't you want to make sure your grandkids are safe too? I think when you get into that kind of stuff, you're creating a connection in that way. Same thing as if you're talking with other parents. Everybody has different backgrounds and different values and different faiths. And so, you can talk about the things, hey, you know what? I read this article, or I saw this talk by this weird guy named Jake who works at Children's Cove, and I looked it up. And did you know 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before they're 18? That's crazy. So we're talking about body safety, and this is some of the rules that we're having because we want to make sure they're safe. There's nothing ever wrong about defending your child, right? And so I think that when we look at this as the context that we're not trying to hurt other people's feelings. We're not trying to tell them what they're doing is wrong. We're just telling them we're raising our child this way, and the reason why is safety. And you have to respect that, and never feel shy about that.
We had a question submitted in advance for you, Jacob. Jacob, why are you so awesome? How do you take care of your own mental health while working with children and families experiencing trauma?
I would make a joke, but it's definitely inappropriate. No, I think the biggest piece is, recognizing that we all have difficult things that come up in our lives. And, for me, my unhealthy habit is working too much. And so I would I'll just throw this out, full disclosure. I would bury a lot of the stress and the challenges related to the work and the content into doing more, right? But then sometimes what I would do is then I would neglect myself. And so I found that having a balance between those things was very important. So recognizing what are those things that help you recharge. At the Cove, we do a lot of work around vicarious trauma, or what's called secondary traumatic stress. We've had some fantastic presenters come to our conference. We've worked with, the Northeast Regional Child Advocacy Center. We've all gone through some trainings on kind of stress management around that. But developing our own internal plans is important. So for me, that's spending time outside in nature, that's gardening. It's making sure that I'm taking care of my body in healthy ways. So, I'm on my fourth one of these today, making sure I'm drinking a lot of water. Recognizing when I'm having a hard time and kind of changing that moment that I'm in by going for a walk or going and talking to a coworker, and asking for support. I think there has been a stigma for a long time in these helping professions of saying, "Oh no, I'm not bothered by this." Nonsense. I haven't met one professional who in one way, shape, or another has not been impacted by this kind of challenging work. And it's the same thing for partners in law enforcement, child protection, firefighters, medical professionals. These helping professions are very difficult. And so having a good personal plan is important, but also having a very supportive team and a supportive culture within the team, and we're lucky to have that at Children's Cove, is also important as well.
Absolutely. So let's do our giveaway real quick, and then we will come back and discuss just a few closing thoughts and about Children's Cove and some of your upcoming stuff you're going to do. So we are giving away a $25 gift card to the 1856 Country Store on Cape Cod. It's in Centerville, and if you've never been there, they have all kinds of treats. Definitely not your grandmother's country store, what they're used to. This has been around for generations. One of the things you may see out there, it wouldn't be complete without sitting on one of the political Democrat and Republican benches right out in front. And what a time of year to shoot on over and take a fun picture in front if you'd like. Maybe split the family up in front of both of them. They're right up the road from Craigville Beach, just around the corner from Four Seas Ice Cream. And they have old-time delights, but more than penny candy. They have holiday stuff, Secret Santas and Yankee Swappers. Absolutely love them. Old-fashioned toys, teas, sweats, souvenirs, as well as beautiful jewelry, accessories, a fabulous selection of greeting cards, home accents, and decor with a seaside flair. Family owned, and definitely one of the places to be. So we got $25 tonight. All you had to do was submit a question live to Jacob, which we had one come in from YouTube. We had a couple come in from Facebook, from my personal page, and then some Google submissions. So I'm going to randomize this. And our winner is Elizabeth DeMello, who asked the question about the pediatrician. That was a great question. I hadn't even thought about something like that. Wouldn't even occur to my mind. So we'll contact you after the show tonight, and you'll be getting $25 to the country store. I hope you get yourself something nice. Jacob, I'm always glad to have you on. You are a great guest. I know we've talked. We're going to have you on a lot in the future. So before we go, let's spend a few minutes just talking again about Children's Cove, some of the upcoming things you got going on, where you're looking to do some education, and then you and I can chat about how we're going to have you on again.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're looking forward to, and we're still in process, so I'm only going to give away a little bit of it. But back in January and February, pre-COVID shutdown, we actually ran a series of focus groups across the Cape and both islands, to really to tie into the community, connect to the community, focus on that community education piece, talking to parents and really looking at what is the information that you want, right? What does our community want? And that's something that I'm very passionate about. I want to make sure that we're providing that information to everybody. And so because of that, in the near future, we're going to be doing a new recorded video series talking about some of these topics, such as, how to have a conversation about body safety, what is, how to talk about consent with teenagers, online safety, how to recognize and respond to those instances where there may be abuse. We want to make that information easy, accessible, digestible. That's not 3 hours long and you got to read 15 handouts. We want to give you that information and find better ways to connect, to ask those questions and reach out for support and reach out for resources. One of the pieces that we've been also really looking at some new ways, and we have some exciting stuff coming, of how to make our staff, how to make our team, and how to get that information about resources and support for everyone more accessible. With these challenges of kids being at home, with parents being on triple duty of being a custodian, janitor, keeping kids on task with their online school, or if they're going to school. We want to make sure that if kids are reaching out and looking for some support, that they have additional options to do that. So we're investigating some ways to do that. And we're still continuing with a lot of our other supportive services for families that we have seen. We just did, put together and gave out more than 50 backpacks of school supplies to families in need, really responding to those supports and resources needed for families that we've served, and we have some more great stuff coming down the road.
Yeah, you bring up some good points with more and more us being online and the global world really being online and things moving faster and faster and parents pulling triple duty, work, school, and managing the home. It's easy to let things kind of not oversee things or things slip through the cracks. And I want to bring it back to that first initial piece we talked about. It's crucial for communication.
Absolutely.
It really is. And we've used the hashtag before, have the conversation.
Absolutely.
Have the conversation. Things are happening. If you're not watching the news and doing your own investigation right now into things happening that happen worldwide, that are happening in this country, in this state, in this community, every single day, if you are not aware, you need to be aware. And you need to educate your children, because otherwise someone else is going to. And that's a fact.
Yeah, and just creating that atmosphere of dialogue and saying, hey, there's a lot of crazy things that are happening right now, and I don't want you to feel scared about coming to talk to me about anything. It doesn't. There's nothing that prevents you from starting to have these conversations now. If you have a 15-year-old or 16-year-old and they start hitting you with that hard eye roll, just take that breath, suck it up, and just keep moving forward. Sometimes these conversations, they're going to make a difference down the road.
A huge difference.
Absolutely.
I agree with that. And we have to be vigilant. We have to educate our children, and communication is key. It's everything. That is, and starting earlier the better. But and if you do start early, it's going to be easier when they turn 13, 14, 15 years old, because you'll have already set the stage along the way.
Easier, not easy.
Well, easier. Like you said, if you're just starting to have it at 15, it's going to be a little tougher. But push yourself through that eye roll and just say, listen, you can talk to me about anything. And you have to be willing as a parent to sit there and listen. I actually read an article about Will Smith and his conversations with his daughter, because it was all about how they've always had their kids could tell them anything.
Yeah.
And the kids were not disciplined. And this was about everything, which I don't know if I 100%, but I like the thought. You can talk to us about anything. As long as you're open and honest, you won't be in trouble. But if we ever find out you don't tell us something, then you'll be in trouble. And he reflects upon this and he goes, there were some things I was like,
I wish I didn't know that.
I wish I didn't know. You should really have that conversation with your mother. And you know what? That's okay as a parent too. They may, when they're younger, they may prefer a parent over the other. And when they're older, you as a parent, dad may not be comfortable having that conversation with his 17-year-old daughter, or he might be okay with it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's knowing that. But attempting to keep that communication open, and it's everything. And then they go off to college, and you get even less.
And that's I think that's the big piece, that when we're setting this out, is you want to lay that foundation to be able to prepare them for having those conversations when they are young adults, and they're transitioning into that being by themselves, and they're going to be faced with those situations, and you're not going to be right there. So you would hope that they'd be able to pick up the phone and call you, and this will kind of lead to that point. I just wanted to jump back to what you were talking about. I think I just was on a training and listening to a peer not too long ago, and she brought up a really fantastic point, especially when we're talking about online stuff and we're talking about mobile technology and what teens have access to, and all of that. There's a lot of times where kids are unfortunately too scared to go to their parents to tell them about something that had happened, because they're worried that they're going to lose that device, they're going to lose that connection, they're going to lose those things. And trust me, I don't want them to have the device in the first place, but that's not the reality of the way things are going to go when they get older. And I would much rather them feel comfortable coming to talk to me about something inappropriate, a mistake that was made online, than never telling me about it and letting that thing snowball to a place where it's now wildly out of control. And so I think we have to think about what is that immediate reaction that we may have, and what is the long-term impact or implications of that. And it's hard to do. I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that all of these things are easy, because they're not. I try to practice what I preach a lot of the times, and sometimes I'm exhausted and I freaking can't. And that's okay too. You can come back and you can try again another day.
But I could tell you from experience, after your internet safety talk, and it provoked me to have a conversation with my older one about, oh, have you ever seen anything that might have made you a little uncomfortable on Fortnite when you were playing? And it was the next day after our thing, and he says, well, I actually saw, they had a character run through, and she was a cartoon character, and she was naked. And I said, well, and he's like, oh, they shut it down. And I was like, well, I'm glad you told me. And we had that whole conversation. How would you feel about if it was a naked body of yourself or someone else? I mean, I know it was a cartoon character, but it opened the conversation. And then it was interesting because he's more comfortable. I can already see it because he's approached me with other questions since then. So it's opened the door. And it does. You're right. It's not easy. Have I not been 100% comfortable sometimes for the question or ready for it?
You're never comfortable. Yeah.
But, you kind of roll with it, and you just do the best you can. Keep it open, keep it honest.
And I think, and again, I think that this is the piece that sometimes we get stuck on as parents, and this happens to me too, right? Is what do we all want to do? We want to do it right. We want to do it right. We want to do it right the first time. We don't want to make mistakes. We want to appear infallible at times. Well, guess what? That's not life. We screw up. We make mistakes. We say things the wrong way. We're going to get these conversations wrong, but it's not permanent. It's not now you've blown it and you can't do it again. You can always try again tomorrow or the next time, because there's a lot of opportunity. There's always an opportunity for a teaching moment. Be patient with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Just try, because it's better to try and not get it right, but be 70% there. Don't be 0% there. Be 60% there. It's still going to be something. It's still initiating. It's allowing that practice.
Absolutely. We have childrenscove.org across the bottom for their resources. Stay tuned. And once I start sharing some of the educational videos that are in the works, we'll be sharing them too. I also have 1856 Country Store across the bottom. Definitely check them out. Tell them you heard about them here at Cape Cod Moms on the Parent Pod with Jacob and Amy tonight. Jacob, I can't wait to have you again. I look forward to a lot of upcoming topics. I definitely want to talk about consent. I want to talk about grooming. I want to talk about all of it. So we're going to have you back again regularly as one of our education experts. I think you bring a wealth of information. I'm so happy you could join us again tonight. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Next week, we will be joined by Alexandra Speck from A Morning Mom, and she's a local mom and comedian, author. She 2 kids, local, and she'll be a lot of fun. We'll be doing a little lighthearted stuff next week. And then the week after, we have Merrill Reed from Merrill's Art and Music, who's going to be talking about music education and some suggestions and things if you have your kids homeschooling, if you have them remote and you're trying to supplement, or even if your kids are in person and you want to include music in the everyday life. That we live and die by the music in this house. It's always on, even in our car or when I'm dancing in the kitchen pretending to make a good lunch. I'm just kidding. My teachers say my lunches are good. They could just be saying that. Anyways, thank you everybody so much for joining us. We'll see you next week at 8 o'clock. Thank you, Jacob, again. And we'll see you all next time on the Parent Pod. Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye.